Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, her website taxpayer.com. Welcome back to the show, Kris.
Thanks for having us.
Kris, you pointed out in one of your articles, our Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister spent $5,000 for what, 2 Zoom calls?
2 Zoom calls, which is just mind-blowing. So this was some very good work that was done by a podcaster, and they run their own news website there, and they got the access through Freedom to Information, and they got the way bill, basically, for 2 Zoom calls, including a bunch of emails where you can read it's between the staffers saying, oh, well, the minister doesn't need anything fancy, quote, she'll just be using her laptop. 2 Zoom calls, $5,000. So how on earth do you spend $2,500 a pop on 2 Zoom calls? And this was an international video call between Chrystia Freeland and her international colleagues. And again, it was, everybody's been cooped up at home and stuck in their offices and working by Zoom. We get that. If she needed wardrobe or something, okay. But $5,000 for 2 video calls, they have some explaining to do.
Have they explained why it was so expensive when, if you keep it under half an hour, isn't it free?
Yes, it is free. And no, they haven't explained. My hunch, based on having worked on the Hill, my hunch is that, yes, they did a Zoom call, but for some crazy pants reason, they also hired an outside camera firm to come videotape her doing the Zoom call on a laptop for whatever reason, promotional or keep a recording device, or I'm not sure. But that's my hunch. But see, even then you can't spend $5,000 because it wasn't as if she went and rented, kind of one of those fancy private TV studios that you have to use sometimes in different cities. No, she did it from her regional office in Toronto, like the physical building the taxpayers already own. So it's just baffling.
Well, I don't know if it was the Taxpayers Federation who released this number, $400 million spent on outside consultants because the federal cabinet doesn't have the expertise to know anything about the stuff they do.
I know. That might have been us, might have been Blacklock's, might have been the Sun. There's a few very industrious investigative journalists still in Ottawa, thank goodness, because they're the ones on any side of the spectrum, it doesn't matter. They're the ones that dig up all this information about spending and travel itineraries and all that jazz. But yeah, they're spending a heck of a lot of money on outside consultants because for some reason they don't have, the wherewithal in-house. Now, politicians come from all walks of life. I've met politicians that come from everywhere from, grade 10 education, very earnestly representing their rural and industrial type ridings that do a very good job, all the way to, PhD lawyer types like Michael Ignatieff. All of them can be great legislators. But the departments that they work with, if they become cabinet ministers, are full of experts. And they should be. That's how they're billed. That's why we pay them a lot of money. And so it's a real head-scratcher that apparently it's routine now to do outside consultants. Now, if it's something new or innovative, we don't expect, all of our bureaucrats at some department to understand exactly how maybe an Apple startup would work. Okay, fine, if you need to contract out that expertise. But doing it as a matter of course, then what are we paying them for?
BC had between 600 and 800 heat-related deaths, we suspect. No official report here. Washington and Oregon had the same heat wave hit. They had 100-plus deaths attributed to heat. They've already had preliminary inquiries and suggestions on how to prevent that from happening again. Why does it take BC so long to get anything done?
And it's one of those things, too, where it doesn't cause them a lot of energy in order to say, declare an emergency, put out a warning, admit that they might have screwed up possibly and have an inquiry. And we get it. People are human. Not everybody can, anticipate what's going to happen. But boy, I'm noticing a lot of across the aisle support, I'll put it that way, of being surprised on how slow it seemed that they were warning folks about the heat wave.
Well, first of all, their warning said this will cause death if you don't take appropriate measures. BC just said it's going to be hot.
Yeah, exactly. And it didn't ring right, when the Premier made his announcement after the fact, and that's why he quickly retracted and gave a type of an apology online. And again, we'd say the same thing if this were a BC Liberal Premier or a Green Party Premier. We don't care. This is about governance and leadership and accountability. And so now, in this context, sure, any sort of inquiry that's wanted, they should do it. We need full transparency. And again, we can't let folks say, oh, well, that's going to cost too much and it won't do anything. That's not necessarily true. We have a mechanism that is already built in. It's called the legislature, and it's called committees. Committees have the power to compel witnesses. Everything is on the record. It's translated. It's recorded. It's documented. So if you want to have any form of an inquiry, you can do that at the committee level in Victoria. And yeah, they need some answers here too. It's very troubling.
Well, it's probably connected to our lack of paramedics and ambulances, which again, the government hasn't explained. And they shuffled the people at the top, and they haven't explained how that's going to make any difference as well, because the paramedics for the last 2 months have been complaining that some nights half their ambulances are parked. They're shorthanded by 20%, maybe more. Does this go back to paying paramedics $2 an hour to be on standby?
Yeah, it sure sounds that way. And,
What other emergency person is paid $2 an hour because they're not on an active case?
Exactly.
Does that include doctors, nurses, firemen, policemen?
And I think a lot of people are really surprised when they learn that about BC paramedics. And it's apparently singular. Like, BC paramedics are in a really odd boat. And I started actually reading up on it myself, just for my own interest. And apparently it was initially fashioned after volunteer village fire departments in like the early 1900s. And for some reason, the way they're treated by the Crown did not get updated. It's a weird situation. And I'll just give you an idea where their priorities are here. Number one, they should have been on this 10 years ago, on being able to manage the people they already have and do it efficiently so that when people call 911, you aren't waiting half an hour. That is a basic element of service I think that all people want in BC, Taxpayers Federation or no. And number two, yeah, they need to look at where they're spending money. Just to give you an idea, what we're spending now per year on the interest on our debt could pay for the salaries of 50 new paramedics for 10 years. So, yeah, they need to get their act together. They need to realize where they need to be prioritizing their money. And they need to be able to have more accountability, because even if it isn't about money, say it's not even about salary, if they've got a lineup of ambulances sitting there waiting and not actually out on calls, that doesn't sound efficient. That doesn't sound accountable. So they need to have a much more clear line of communication, especially when it's a life and death situation. They need to do better management.
Is it hard to hire paramedics because they're not paid enough?
Wouldn't it be, though? Right? I think this is a personal anecdote, and, not speaking on behalf of the CTF. I was actually at a garden center a few weeks ago, and the lady there, really nice lady, very hardworking, very pleasant. And we got to chit-chatting, of course, because, old journalists die hard and you have to gab with everybody. Turns out she'd been a paramedic for years and years, and she quit. She had gone through all this crazy level of training, most of it all at her own expense. And she said that she put up with it for years, where she would actually have to take 2 ferries in order to get to the region where she was supposed to cover, and she would lose money. Like, not only would she not be paid properly through the system, she'd lose money. And then, of course, the service lost her. So all this person with all these skills and all this training is now gone and happily working stress-free at a garden center. Why? Because she said the management was so poor. So We don't even know. Maybe they're just wasting the money. Perhaps they can just channel it better into people who need it, right? Maybe they just need to manage their schedules better, be more responsive. Not sure, but they need some bloody answers there. And again, this is something that a bipartisan committee at the legislature in Victoria could sort out. This is their job.
I believe firefighters have to pay now to get paramedic training, and often they're the first on scene before an ambulance can get there, but they have to pay out of their own pocket now to learn how to do that.
And see, again, this is one of those things where people are scratching their heads, like, does this really make sense? You know, we'll pay for, you know, people's lunches while they're busy being a bureaucrat in some cases in different parts of BC, but we'll do that. We'll turn around and stick a first responder with that fee. It's odd, and to give people the benefit of the doubt, quite often these mistakes aren't malicious. They're just ignorant. It means that one hand isn't talking to the other, one form of the bureaucracy doesn't know how to communicate properly, and this gets jammed up in the system. So again, this is up to the members of the Legislative Assembly. They elected them to do a job. They need to have an all-party committee to sort this out and to clear it up. Look at it this way. If it were a private company, and say their emergency response team was never talking to the finance department or, you know, hospitality or food supply, it would just be a disaster. You wouldn't be able to function as a business or as a corporation. Well, British Columbia is a form of a corporation. It's very big and gangly and complex, and they need to make sure that those lines of communication are darn clear.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims. Kris, gasoline taxes, I know, just drive you right up the wall. What's the latest on especially Vancouver's highest gasoline taxes in North America? It's
quite something, and a lot of folks are really struggling right now. I've been hearing from people who, just anecdotally, they want to go for a trip. They want to, you know, finally done, hopefully with COVID, knock wood, and they want to carefully and safely finally take their families out for a trip, you know, head up to Quesnel, go to Barkerville, go over to the island, play in the Tofino tide pools, something like that. But boy, the price of gas. Filling up a family minivan is over $100 right now. And that's because gas prices are floating around $1.65, $1.70, bouncing back and forth. And the taxes on that, on average in Vancouver, are 68 cents a liter. So if you take that family minivan that has 75 liters in it and you fill it up, more than $50 in that fill up is taxes. So by far the highest price in North America. I think the last time I did the math, we were above even San Francisco by 30 cents a liter. That was really eye-popping. And then with the highest gas taxes on top of that, boy, it costs families getting around way more. And so that's where we're saying, folks, we need to reduce this. Let's take off the two carbon taxes. That's 24 cents combined, because they're not doing anything anyway. Our emissions are going up anyway. All this is a huge cash grab now for the BC government. It's no longer even called revenue neutral. So even if fighting climate change based only on the burning of oil and gas is your number one issue, it's not fixing it in BC. Our emissions keep going up. And then further, on a global scale, if you truly want to reduce emissions, and that's your key fear and concern, okay, fine. But comparatively tiny Vancouver within comparatively tiny British Columbia is not making an impact on global emissions in that way. If we truly want to go for this, we need to go after the big end of the math problem, and that's a place like India. And guess what? The good news is they want to switch. They want to switch from burning animal dung and old wood, which is very high particulate, very high emissions, to cleaner burning natural gas. Guess what we have lots of, with tons of people from all walks of life working in the industry, trying to get it out to port? Natural gas.
And we have the First Nations whose land is on natural gas-rich territory who are willing to produce LNG because they know it means long-term prosperity.
And they're willing to do it tomorrow. I have a friend of mine on Facebook now. We've been connected for, I think, over 3 years. She's absolutely lovely. And she's working on the pipeline up north. And she's First Nation. And it's very, very important to her, her family, her entire group. And so they unfortunately don't get, I'm not going to use her name because she's just a friend of mine, but they unfortunately don't get the attention that some of the more, how would I put this, environmentally driven groups who get a lot of media attention, they're the ones that get the focus, unfortunately. And so again, straight up, meet people where they are. If climate change, but caused by the use of oil and gas and burning of other things that creates CO2 emissions is your key issue, going after Monica filling up her minivan in Langley ain't gonna cut it. All you're doing is taking money out of her bank account and making it so that she has less money to pay for groceries or to get her kids to school or to maybe take that family road trip. We really need to change what we're exporting, and if we do natural gas to a place like India, we will reduce the global emissions.
And for them, it reduces their energy bills because natural gas is relatively affordable.
Yes, exactly. And the government has been working on it, trying to get folks to switch over. And just interestingly, too, I didn't realize this would be another good knock-on effect, as they call it. It's usually women and children in rural areas that spend all day gathering the fuel. So that would free up that time. Maybe, the children could spend more time, reading or going to school or whatever they want to do. But they wouldn't have to be beholden to gathering fuel every single day because they'd be able to have natural gas. Now, other countries have natural gas that they want to sell to them too, but they don't have as good of labor standards or environmental standards or human rights records as Canada does. So to us, it just seems like a win-win. And plus, it's just so expensive for families. The province is taking in, I think, between $2 or $3 billion now per year in the carbon tax. And we need to remember when this was first started in 2008, they told us it was going to stop at $30 a ton, it was going to be revenue neutral, that it would be used to fund alternative energy sources. None of that is true. It's going up to $50 a ton, and Trudeau's going to grab it and drag it off the cliff even further than that once it's on to the federal. It's not even called revenue neutral anymore. Alternatives are still pretty darn scarce. And here in BC especially, very few people get any sort of rebate. You have to have a combined family income, I think, of less than $57,000 per year. And the average two-person working family income in BC is $84,000 per year. So it does not help average working families. It just goes straight into government coffers.
Yeah, and once government gets its hands on a tax, they never give up on it. Don't forget, income tax was introduced as a temporary measure on the richest 5% of Canadians to pay for the First World War. Apparently, we haven't paid for it yet.
Yeah, exactly. And the same sort of thing, when people start arguing for wealth taxes, to give you an example, I know why that's appealing, because it's fun to say, stick it to the rich guy and, eat the rich and make the other people pay for it. And you have this image of yourself or the person, Mr. Moneybags, who's got a top hat and he's whistling with a cane. Well, number one, that wouldn't last very long. If we had a wealth tax in Canada as has been proposed, the feds would blow through that in less than a week. So what are we going to do for the other 51 weeks per year? And number two, like you point out, once that tax is in there, wait till they move the goalposts. Wait till they redefine what's wealthy. Maybe they'll start going after farmers because technically on paper they look wealthy because they're landowners. That's when you get into real problems. And so, yeah, the fewer taxes and the lower we have them, the better.
Under the current government's budgetary practices, how long is it going to take Canada to have a balanced federal budget again?
I couldn't believe this when I first saw it. It came from my colleague in Ottawa, and it was just eye-popping. The Parliamentary Budget Officer says that we won't be able to balance the budget federally until around the year 2070. 2070. 2070.
49 years from now.
Yeah. Which, wow. And it was all based on current spending and the lack of discipline. And again, this is coming from one of the more, objective, nonpartisan, just the math ma'am type offices. This is a parliamentary budget officer. They sat there, they looked through all the numbers, they looked through all the budgets, and then they did projections into the future based on spending. where, you know, we'll take them at their word. If the Fed said, hey, we're going to rein it in by this, and this amount over the next 5 years and knocked it down, fine. Like, they took that into account. And they still won't balance it until the year 2070.
Well, okay, that's a date to look forward to, I guess. And in the meantime,
how are we going to pay for it then? We'll have like an oxygen tax or something.
Oh, yes, and a tax to exhale as well.
Leaving the house tax. Well, can you maybe, it reminds me of the end of Christmas Vacation, that excellent Christmas Vacation show with Chevy Chase, and all the police come into the house accidentally thinking, you know, something bad had happened, and they said freeze, and he looks at the police, he says, may we blink? That's how it feels sometimes, tax-wise.
Oh, yeah, the Beatles song, Taxman.
Yeah.
They're going to have to add like another 10 choruses to it.
Grab your guitar.
Kris, where can people go if they want more information about some of the stuff we've talked about today?
Yeah, we've got a great website, and it's full of resources. And, you know, if gas taxes aren't your thing, that's cool, too. We have a new petition up, for example, on getting rid of the PST on used items. So if you're, you know, a mom trying to save money and you're shopping at Value Village, you're typically getting dinged PST on all that used stuff. That's not cool at all. It's already been sold. And then on bigger ticket items, people pay through the nose for even used vehicles in British Columbia. They pay PST, which is just not right. It's already been sold. It's already been taxed at the sale point. So we have a wide range of things that you can sign petitions for. You can take a look at how to write a firm letter. Go to our website, taxpayer.com, and we'll help you fight for taxpayers.
Kris, thank you so much for being on the Goddard Report.
Thank you for caring.
My guest has been Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. As she told you, her webpage, taxpayer.com. If you have any questions for Kris or any of our other guests, we'll ask that question for you. If you send it to info@howstreet.com. Find us on Twitter @TalkDigitalNet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.